I keep trying to start my intro as usual, but every time I get to the end, something glitches, like in my expression. And so I'm skipping the greeting. This is the first time I've manifested a reading, a channeling, a recording. I don't even know what to call this way. I just want to share. It's just very strange to me, and it's a bit like, it's just wild, because I've been waiting to open a container for a particular personal reading. And every time I contemplate opening this container, I hear the word James. I hear James. And it's been coming up for a week. Couldn't figure it out. Then yesterday, I was journaling, and something was coming up for me, and it was really around how I approach containers. And I got a whole lot of download as well about the concept of a container. I'm going to make a note about that for this, if I can get there. And then during the day today, I got a download about the sun, the moon, and the earth, and how these relate, how these aspects of nature relate to our own creation and manifestation. And I'm going to share it. But I couldn't quite figure out, where this fits. And then in the second part of my meditation later in the day, I started getting a download on, a reading, a channeling for someone who's been hermiting for what feels like a very, very long time. That turned out to be about, 4 pages. And I figured I'll record tonight, which is where I'm sitting right now. But the thing is, this comes in a day after I was journaling, which was yesterday. I was journaling about asking Spirit to accommodate a different part of our collective. I don't know how to describe this part, because it was more just a sense of wanting to open up to information that maybe doesn't necessarily apply to me right now. And that's not to say that's always my intention, but I've just noticed that a lot of my content has been at this point, and I felt this pulling in this other direction that was not yet clear. And so in a sense, these 4 pages became that. And it's an intriguing, I found it intriguing. A lot of things came out of this channeling around connection, around being a wounded healer and that journey. And then I went and checked in on my emails, to catch up on those. And James comes up again. I mean, James was back earlier today. James comes up. And then a client called Jessica, I needed to respond to her email. And I started thinking about this James. And I'm like, why does this J name keep coming up? And so I then thought, why don't you search James in your emails? Maybe something's there. So I searched James, and I find an email from September last year. We'd been corresponding for some time, but there's an email that he sent with some questions, and I didn't have the capacity at the time to respond to him. And I actually did respond, and I just said, I need some time to just contemplate how I'm going to address this question. And I feel like it wasn't even one question. It was, in all, he had 4 questions. And I just felt like I can't respond to this on an email. I didn't know how to get back to him. There was definitely, from the way I responded, there was definitely that sense that, this could be a video. This is a lot of information. And each question is like, in itself, a whole topic. But then I couldn't believe it when I read the questions, because there are answers to these questions, at least most of them, that came up through this channeling. And one of the things that came through, and I'm going to take you through it, but one of the things that came through is around how we manifest, is around the topic of the wounded healer, and is about, how we come online. Oh my goodness, I have 44444 on the clock. I've left a screenshot because I've never seen that. But the thing is, even with this name James, At some point, I went to check the Bible. I remember this is in the last week. I went to check the Bible because I thought maybe James is a book in the Bible, because the number 14414, fours came up for James. The other thing is that as I was channeling this information, let's say I consider myself as relatively progressed on this healing journey. Let me put it that way. And this is not in comparison to anyone, because, I mean, healing journeys just by nature are so dynamic on an individual level. And if you look at us as forming part of a collective. But as I was channeling this information that, I had requested on a level, I had requested this, as I was channeling it, it felt so familiar. And not familiar in terms of, now I'm not talking about James. I mean familiar in the sense that I could relate to so many of the things that were coming up and the concerns and the feeling, because it's a path I've walked. And I have 0606 on the clock. And this speaks to me. I mean, the 6 of Pentacles was coming up today in my cards, and, sixes. And this is really around how generous I can be about information that I have, wisdom that I've gathered for the purposes of sharing. And this concept of it is in giving that we receive. There's something karmic about the number 6 in the sense that there is also a lot to be gained somehow. This is not very clear right now, but there's something to be gained out of generously sharing, yes, the journey of healing my own karma. I want to take a moment and briefly explain James's email to me. It was really around how he came online. A crown chakra awakening. I believe he referred to 6 months prior. So that's 6 months before September, which takes us to about March last year. And one thing that happened in March last year, that's when I started this channel, Pyramid Energy. And I found it to be a time of some really intense divine masculine awakening within myself. And I also noticed, even in the audience, and I suppose that's why I focus a lot on, as much as we do talk about the divine feminine healing, a lot of my karma has been around this healing of confidence, this healing of the worthiness wound, this healing of showing up and, using my voice, my expression. So that's healing of and the crown chakra awakening, which is this chakra center of belief and protection and being held, and the entry point of all energy and information. Well, not all energy. I just mean, that greater sense, energy. The words are not wording. But also very much around this Christ consciousness that I came upon along the way, being partly this idea of protection, that there's an energy within myself that can be awakened and start to protect me, that I start to become accountable to if I want to move more in alignment with my path and myself. This idea that the more healing I do on these experiences that I've had, and repeat experiences that, these recurring experiences and challenges that I experience, that if I go to the core and heal each wound, it opens up and unclogs my channel. So his questions were, how did you know you were a healer? His next question was, how did you know how to channel? And then he asked, how did you pick the way in which you channel? And he asked, if you were me, how would you expand this? And it's amazing to me because throughout my note-taking, as I was channeling in my writing, I asked myself, do I have a bias towards writing? There are various forms of expression. Some people paint. Some people write music, sing. or even just instrumental, like not necessarily, words. Some people are obviously poets, writers like me, Some are dancers. There are so many ways of creating art. And I'm also always mindful to mention that we in ourselves, the self in itself is a manifestation, a piece of art. We are working on ourselves and manifesting a form of ourselves. Because of how I got here, and I'm sitting with 4.5 pages, I believe that the best way to work through this is to just share with you from the beginning and follow this order, because I really don't know how else I'm going to approach this. I think this is how it's meant to be. I wrote about the relationship between the sun, the moon, and the earth. And this was coming together for me quite visually. I was like visualizing the sun and the earth and the moon and all of their roles as they relate to my being and to creation and manifestation. 11:11. The sun projects energy onto and into my being, and my being absorbs it and transforms it into fruit, brings it to life. The breath also plays a part in this process. In order for this to be received, being this energy that's being absorbed from the sun, and for the potential to be created, I need to be grounded, meaning that I need to be at ease, receptive, and also trusting of the process, and that this is nature. I want to add here that as a healer, I've just always been drawn to numbers. Being drawn to numbers started at school. I loved maths. I loved the patterning, and there was just a connectedness to numbers that I've always had. I also found, as I was learning how to read cards, specifically the tarot, when I started to connect with the 4 elements, air, water, fire, and earth, I started to understand these as they relate to actual elements, how these elements that we exist in behave and interact. And then also my own nature, how connected these two things are, in remembering that I too am nature. At the time when I started, I wasn't even aware of all this ego work and all of that. But I've just always found it easier and much smoother for me to process cards in terms of these elements, because they say so much more. The cards say so much more when you understand how fire behaves, how it feels within the body, let's say, what air does for us, all of these things. And this has developed for me, but I'm really able to draw a lot of information that's already true to me, because it's already proven within nature. And if I don't see myself as separate from nature, then a lot of how nature behaves would then also be applicable to me. My notes continue. Water is also essential. This is wisdom and care. This can be done by cultivating healthy environments, those conducive to growth. This is trusting the days and the nights to fulfill their own processes and purpose. The day is for sunshine and exposure to light. The night is for coolness and rest. Both are essential, otherwise we experience burnout, overexposure. This portion in particular is really speaking to, quite literally, solar plexus work, the idea of showing up, and also throat chakra work, expression. And the crown chakra also comes up for me here, because this is where our beliefs sit, the things that we believe. And there's so much work that needs to happen there to open that up so that we can achieve balance as we express ourselves, as we show up, because we can often feel stagnant or lost and confused when we don't recognize the purpose of the night. We also need to remember not to harvest prematurely, not to rush the process. Also, some plants we grow are meant to be potted. So that's like to be put in a pot plant, and admired. Some are meant to be consumed by us, dedicated purely for us, like on an individual level. Some are meant to be left exactly where they are to continue to produce their fruit, either in cycles or over time. These take the most patience to develop. They carry lasting wisdom, if you think of it like a tree. And then there are some that are there for their beauty, to be admired for this and to inspire. Some are for feeding others in need. As I was picturing these plants, which, became a metaphor for creations, manifestations, it really helped me to understand how to regard these various types of manifestations. Not just that, how to treat them, what to expect of them, which aspects of their growth and development happen naturally and which require my intervention. For example, how often should I water something? And also considering that we have rain, and so there are times I don't need to water. Some of these things just happen naturally as a part of nature. And so there's waiting periods. There are things that can be overwatered. There are things that can be neglected and underwatered. And also what to do with this information. The expectations of timing that we project onto these creations as well. For example, these ones that are meant to be potted. You don't want to pot too early. You don't want to place your plant in a pot too early, separated from where it belongs. And you also don't want the plant to outgrow a pot just because you have not attended to separating it into its own space. And so this is really around even organizing your creations and just how you perceive how these things are created, because it's not all on us. And so those were the lessons that I received from the sun, the moon, and the earth. And especially this idea of being at ease and relaxing into knowing that I matter. Okay, that just came out. That I matter, for example, not just matter in the sense of I am important, I am significant, but also in the sense that I am matter. So all of the matter that's around me of nature, I'm part of that. I'm part of that. And so how nature behaves, I can lean into that wisdom too, because it works. It's divine, it works. And I'm no exception. All I need to not do is get in the way. And also to dedicate myself to continually reminding myself of this truth. In this next part, I want to talk about this person this part of the collective that I was reading for as I sat with this information that was building up in my container. I've written here, someone who's been hermiting for what feels like a very, very long time. I'm sensing longer than a year, perhaps longer. Watching from the sidelines, but not taking action. And so this is actually someone who knows they're gifted. This is someone who wants to do something, but there's a sense of them waiting for something else to hit them before they take this action. I want to talk about how we regard expression, its purpose. Because some of us, yes, are called to platforms to express ourselves. And others, I don't think it's just one or the other, but I just mean that it's important to express oneself, because it's through this expression that we become students of ourselves and teachers to ourselves. And this is where I started asking myself, am I biased? Am I biased towards writing? Because that's my form of art. And it's how I've developed my channel. If I had not been writing, I would not have been able to switch seats into the observer. Maybe I would have, but I'm talking about the path that I actually walked. And so writing allowed me to become an observer, there are many things I learned through writing. One that's coming to mind immediately is how beautifully words come out. Okay, so that's how I regard the words that come out. How they begin to flow from another space. To watch this process, to also see, I type a lot of my work, but handwriting helps me to see what level of flow I'm in. The more in flow I am, the more flowing my handwriting comes out. When I'm not at ease, I can tell from the energy of my hand that's writing and how the letters form on the page. And so I'm able to see it and recognize it. This is also part of the process. It also helps me know whether I feel very vague about what I'm writing, or whether, if it's like neat and blocky the way I'm writing, like if I'm not like allowing the cursive to happen, for example, I can tell that I'm sort of feeling tight, if you know what I mean. So that I'm able to observe through writing. But more than that, there's an expressiveness that occurs through writing that has really healed my voice, my, what do you call this, sound voice, the vocal part of me. And it's hard to use the word vocal because you can be vocal in writing. So I think what I want to say is sonic. And I shouldn't have hesitated because that's the word that I got from spirit. It was the first word, but it made me think of Sonic the Hedgehog. So what I did is that I would write a lot of readings, my own readings. I even went through a phase where I was writing personal readings that I was doing for people. This is pre-pyramid energy. Those readings helped me, the written ones helped me understand the kind and the quality of information that I'm actually sharing. Because as I'm just speaking, let's say into a recording for a reading, the information doesn't always appear organized. But as soon as I started doing these other readings, I didn't do them for very long because they felt cold. To deliver something in writing felt cold. But this is when I was first able to recognize that I was sharing wisdom. That wisdom was not clear to me when I was just recording the readings, because I was just flowing and reading cards. And so in writing, I was able to separate sections, give feedback on different areas, and that's where I realized, wait, I could have, I wonder when this person comes back for another reading whether there'll be different information, because wisdom is wisdom. And so what I'm sharing is, I believe writing is incredibly valuable. And not just valuable, it's incredibly important. Because not only does it allow us to observe ourselves, our words, record them, so like ground them, because writing is a form of grounding. You're taking something that currently lives either in the form of air or fire or this, physically invisible water, and you're grounding it. You're turning it into matter. You take a piece of paper and you write on it. That information is now grounded. It's now a part of the earth. It's visible. It exists in real life. And because it's grounded, it can't be transformed unless, you've got to literally transform it. You've got to actively transform it, take it, copy it onto something else, edit it, do something with it to transform it. But it then creates sort of like a peg in the sand, if I could put it that way. Something for you to look back at and see your progress. Something for you to look back at and also see where you were at a point in time, your abilities, your confidence, your idea of where you are in your healing journey. All of that information is now recorded. So it becomes a part of you that's earthed, a past part of you, or however you want to see it. And writing brought me to this channel because it's in, how do I share this? Yes. There are so many things you can think of doing and contemplate and meditate. and you can stay in that cycle. But if you write, you can see yourself, and it becomes easier to, let's say, share what you've written. So it's almost like taking that next step to sharing and expressing for the purposes of sharing. You know, like I mentioned earlier when we were talking about the sun, moon, and earth, some stuff is meant for us on a personal level, and some plants are meant to be consumed and shared with others, whether that's for healing purposes or for admiration, for inspiration. And so the next thing I wrote here is that there are parts of your expression that can only be realized in action. And so you won't find out about many of your gifts until you put them into action. And I believe this is James, let's say, but again, this is collective. Let's say for you, you've confirmed your intuition and its clarity, but you still feel held back by something internal. You're waiting for its resolution, but this internal thing that you're waiting on is unclear. And I want to say here, your offering is valuable, but it's currently sitting in the form of an opportunity. It needs you to make it happening. And this comes from practicing your expression. And that's already taking action. And I believe there are many things I could share about my own personal journey, but it's through this written expression and actually exercising your throat chakra, it brings it into balance. It's through this that you'll learn about your own journey, because all of our journeys are very different. Some things can be similar, some things could be exactly the same, I've learned here on the channel. However, you need to learn your truth, and you can learn your truth and develop not just your voice, your entire self through expression. And so that answers somewhat the question of how did you know how to channel? I learned how to channel through practicing my expression. And no one can really prepare you for that moment where you drop into the flow. My containers, as I open them, I'm not in flow from immediate. Like, it's not always like that. It's frequently like that, at least up until now. But I can feel, once I'm cruising, I can feel that. And it's as if like the pressure is less in my channel, because I've practiced and exercised my channel. My channel is more flexible and the channel widens. So the pressure is released. I'm seeing this very physically. I literally often see a channel as though it's like this invisible pipe. Okay, it's like this invisible pipe where information travels from one point to the next. And as I clear up this pipe, and there are many ways of clearing your pipe, for me, those ways are called healing. And I'm going to share more about it because it's come up as well. For example, healing of the worthiness wound. I spent quite a lot of time last year. The theme was healing the worthiness wound. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to link a playlist in the description box for you and anyone who feels like this is an area where they could do with some healing. It was very effective, this work that I did. And so it's worth looking at. A lot of it is on the channel itself. There are aspects where I did extendeds on Patreon. But I also, when I was thinking about the container, something else I wanted to explain, this development of a container. Something else I wanted to share with you is that the items that I've posted on Patreon, Spirit described this to me as a purpose-built container. So the items that I've placed on Patreon are purpose-built. And so they have healing outcomes within them. Unlike a lot of the channelings that I share here collectively, these are very open. And, I only know this from the result often that this is the case. These ones are open, and so we may all follow together. But when this item of, healing content is purpose-built and I put it there on Patreon, it then becomes something that can heal in isolation. And so for a particular type of wound where I've channeled that information, and it's not always a wound, but if I have if there's a particular type of wound that I know is like the gateway to a next part of someone's journey, I know that that container will serve that purpose. And I'm also confident about its effectiveness because it's worked on me. Something else that's coming up for me here is there's often this thing that comes up when we observe other people and they're like quite developed in their expression. And we tell ourselves, we somehow believe that they are special, that they are unique. Yes, they are unique and they are special, but that's no different to you. I didn't grow up from my childhood, or I wasn't psychic. I wouldn't have called myself that. I think that's how I want to put it. I didn't have an awareness of this ability to channel and to know stuff that I maybe am not privy to. And so while I knew these things, I knew the things that I was not privy to, there was that sense, but I wrote a lot of those inputs off as overthinking, or I wrote them off as a hunch, which is that's calling something a hunch is almost minimizing all of the information that what you've called a hunch can offer you, because a hunch is a knowing. And once you accept that you know something, that it's not just a hunch, yes, it's a feeling, but it's a knowing. And once you accept it's a knowing, you can then accept more information about that knowing. And suddenly the container has grown around whatever that topic is. And so it's really that part of me combined with a lot of my own interests, like I mentioned numbers, I mentioned nature, the things that I find myself drawn to, attracted towards, these things, and then combining that with my expression has kind of been the creation of my style of healing. Another way of healing that I've always found myself very much attracted to is the chakras. And I have not gone beyond the 7. And I understand there are others. I kind of, beyond my crown, I kind of consider that there's this greaterness beyond that. And I would call that the sky, all of everything it has to offer. And below my root, I would consider that Mother Earth. That's kind of how I see my chakras working. And I've found so much healing in this sense, and it's only really in the last year that I realized that I can actually pick up on information about, let's say, the collective's energy that container is sharing with me through tapping into each chakra and hearing what it's saying to me. And it often shows me things in pictures, in visuals, combined with feeling and sometimes words. So all these things come in and combine, and I trust my instinct on what that chakra is telling me. And because of the order of the chakras and what each chakra represents, I'm able to understand what may be inhibiting the flow of information either upwards or downwards. That's how I know if the heart is blocking information that needs to rise from the sacral chakra, solar plexus up into expression. That's how I picture it. So I find the chakras system to be amazing. I wish I could have come up with a better word, but that's the word. It's amazing. And really what it does for me is it represents this portal of creation and manifestation, because these things are born from the ground. These things are born of the earth. And we have these avatars that we exist in, that we're being in, that are able to process all of this information, what comes through as information, energy and information from the earth through our bodies upwards, and we can create from that. And how I see us as actually being anchored reminds me a little bit of the Matrix. You know how they'd get plugged in with that like skull cap? It's as if the crown is like our connection to this greaterness, you know, how we're held and all of that information that can come through. And so when I think about James's email, where he talks about this crown chakra awakening, I mean, James might not even be watching the channel anymore, I don't know, but this information, so much came through for me. But the beauty of a crown chakra awakening is that it happens in divine time. It's literally like it just happens. It just, one day, you were always plugged in, okay? You were always plugged in, but one day you come online. And this happens from the crown. And almost at the same time, as this is happening from the crown, I mean, I believe some people could think they're losing it in this, I want to call it a moment, but it's not really, because it's more of a process during this transformation, is that the next chakra then is your third eye. And so your third eye starts becoming sort of your helper and problem solver in this process of understanding what the hell is happening. And now I want to just move into, now that I've said that part, is this concept that your environment is of your creation. These words felt harsh at face value, but then I started to understand, wait, I can just speak quite, lovingly, but also just frankly on this, because I very much connect to this difficulty of accepting and embracing the idea that your environment is of your creation. We hear it so often, and it can result in like a knee-jerk reaction to want to reject that a lot of these things we perceive as negative that happen around us to actually, and to us, that happen to us. We look at it as something happened to me, because that's how we speak. But what we maybe do not see very easily in that moment and in that phase of the journey is that all these things happen for us. They happen for us because they become the opportunity to guide you in the direction of your path, your desired path. And so it all looks very indirect and inconvenient a lot of the time. But if you can imagine that you and yourself are the creator of yourself, okay? I had a bit of a glitch there. I recognize it as religious trauma, which is another thing I addressed last year. But you are your creation, your avatar and the things that you're able to process through and create in this life. You are part of this, and you are of it. And as much as you can manifest all of this, you are also manifesting the opportunities that can assist and become catalysts to this development. And so to say that your environment is of your creation is not actually to place the fault on you, but rather to empower you through realizing that you have the power to transform your environment. And also to realize that each aspect that brings you either discomfort or conflict or dis-ease is pointing at something behavioral in you that is asking to be brought into balance. And another thing is that we all know that there are many types of healers. But I am a firm believer that one's healing modality is literally directly linked to how you healed yourself, the areas that you needed healing in. Because I would not be able to speak to you like this, and often with the conviction that I say things with, if I didn't believe them. And the only way I can believe them is to know their truth through experience. And so maybe sometimes I do get absolutely fresh information that may not apply to me. However, it's this way of understanding how I get information that's led me to trusting it as it comes. And another thing is that it is not always in balance. And so as I go, the next point is coming up. So as I go, I bring myself back into some, closeness with balance by continuing with the healing and stripping up and unclogging the areas that are, blurring my view or need pressure released. And this is my next part. I wrote that there are so many phases of healing, and so we should not regard the relationship between the student and the teacher as separate. This can cast an illusion in our minds that there is something we're waiting for, which justifies our non-action. It was very recently that I actually integrated my student and my teacher into my one being. I'd often find that I went through these cycles and often related to the moon cycles, where I would feel that I'm in my teacher phase, and then I would move into my student phase. And so while I'm always sharing on the channel, my awareness would be from a certain perspective within myself. I'd be able to know I'm here as a student, and so I'm channeling information and also absorbing it at the same time. Hence, my not necessarily posting very regularly, because I would allow for time to integrate that information. And I'll share there that that's not always by choice. Not always by choice. Sometimes it's just a struggle to open a container. And so then a reminder that it's okay for everything to feel dark. It's okay for me to rest, and it's okay for me to lean back into my feminine and just be until this feels like it's balanced out again. And then I'd move into the phase where I feel like a teacher. And I don't think you would be able to, I don't know, as a receiver of some of these channelings, I don't know if you'd be able to tell the difference. You'd need to tell me, But there have been times where I can feel I'm the teacher. But then guess what? Not too long after that, I dropped back into student. And so I found this as like this, almost the seesaw of student-teacher. And in the last month, I integrated these two aspects of me. There is the most consistent time, let me put it this way, the most consistent way of being, which I'm in the process of realizing, is to be the student and the teacher at the same time. And I know this comes up in, I believe in Buddhist wisdom and all that, and I don't know because I haven't read up on it, but it's like flagging there. So many of you might already know this. I'm just sharing how it's played out for me. And so that's reduced a lot of, every container is a learning experience for me. And so even if I'm sharing, like today, a whole lot of things that I feel like I know, things from that I've learned in my journey that are coming up for me to share with you now, even though that's there, the student in me is able to pick up on new lessons that are coming up. And so again, it's in giving that we receive, because as I share it with you, there are things I'm drawing from that information, new information that I'm drawing, which reinforces the wonder of doing this kind of work. But it also leaves me a more developed healer on the other side. And one of the main messages I'm trying to share there is, rather than wait to feel like you have something that is ready to share, perhaps start to look at what are the obstacles to your sharing. Those obstacles at face value may appear to be things like, I'm not as good as that person, that person's container looks like it's like structured, their structure looks like it's organized and they know what they're doing, like you want something regular that you want to be able to share. Those things can look like obstacles. But I truly believe the obstacles sit in the chakras, in the solar plexus, and the heart, and the throat. Because if you already feel something's pulling you, if you already feel a pull to do something and it keeps reminding you, that means it's a creation that just has not yet been born. And so that means that you're pregnant. It means that you're pregnant with a creation. And This creation is not going to go anywhere. However, in order for it to rise up, you need to move through. It needs to be able to move through the solar plexus, which is where fear sits, which is where, anxiety sits there, questioning ourselves, doubt sits there. Everything that can be considered counter to confidence is in the solar plexus. And it's often affected then by the next chakra, being the heart. A lot of things sit in the heart, and the heart is a major generator. A lot of things sit in the heart, and so if we have unhealed wounds and perspectives that don't allow us to move into a more healed heart space, that becomes a challenge, because the heart is also, I want to say, the biggest attractor of all of this information. It's a generator and it's a magnet. And so it wants to call in all of this information, but as the information, it's also the filter. So as this information is coming in, it's being interrupted by all this doubt and the fear. It's being interrupted by your perspective on things, how you understand the things that you're perceiving. And so again, this is going back to Christ consciousness, but this is healing these areas, because I consider the throat as perfect already. It's just the opening of it. But once you've passed the heart, it's like open sesame. That's how I see it. I feel like the most healing, especially to this collective I'm addressing today, I feel like it's very much in the solar plexus and the heart. Because once this is flowing and something's pushing you, so you've got a creation that's already trying to push you, and it's the reminder that it's the thing that causes the frustration. It's the thing that causes the frustration because it's the constant reminder of the things that you want to change about yourself, about your environment. All of those things are sitting there. And as you do the healing of the solar plexus and the healing through the heart, not through and to not focus on comparing your creations to other people's creations, because it's a deflection. These words that came out harshly, but it's a deflection. And I believe we're often reminded to go inwards. This is how I go inwards. This is where I spent a lot of my time healing, because especially during the time where I felt unstable in my life, and so that meant that my root chakra was not in balance, and I would look to things like financial security and all of that. These are symptoms of these are the symptoms of a lacking of safety in one's own life, because you can get to a point where you feel safe irrespective of circumstances. This is possible. But I always found that I was chasing my tail, trying to fix, let's say, the more physical senses of safety in my life, without, it's as though the what I was looking for was actually already in me, and I just needed to open up the solar plexus and the heart to allow for it to come out and solve the problem. Because there's a flow through my body, I'm creating change by healing. I'm creating change by nurturing my channel, the conduit of my creations, the ones that will then reflect physically. And this was also in my notes. This, I've got it here in inverted commas, hanging in the balance. And this expression feels perfect because when we use it, hanging in the balance, it has a precarious energy about it. That's a perspective, that's a perception. That's how we're regarding it. Because hanging in the balance, it's like we are working with balance and we are sitting in this space, nurturing and finding balance, and also allowing balance to find us. I say it's precarious because that's like the energy it carries. But actually, if you just look at the words within themselves, they do offer a lot of choice. There is choice But then there's the action that's presenting itself as an opportunity to you. And so if you ask yourself why you're hanging, and this came up when I looked into the cards earlier, the Hanged Man. When you look into why you're hanging, you can find your reasons for hanging, which is what I talked about earlier with the solar plexus and the heart, which is what's sitting between where you are now and the open sesame that I referred to. We often spend extended periods hanging, okay? Hanging and trying to grasp this idea of balance. We hang in there, but what we're actually doing there is waiting. And I wrote here that waiting is like fuel for longing. If you look at the opposite of longing as being peace and fulfillment, and maybe even just being, one can try to grasp these concepts of peace and fulfillment without addressing the source of the longing. Waiting feeds the need itself. So this knowledge that you can transform yourself can be very liberating, because there is something that can be changed within you, healed within you. And I've found awareness is the biggest healer, because once you become aware of something, that's already switched in your mind. And so everything is operating differently. A different formula is being applied to all your actions, your environment, a different formula, because you're creating. The ingredients to this formula are in your solar plexus and your heart. I've also written here that there is this sense of connection already. By that, I mean that you do feel connected to, let's say, your intuition, the collective environment, information that comes in to you. You receive it, and you're able to recognize it as your intuition and as information. So I see that. But currently, this information doesn't have a vessel to collect into. That's why I often talk about a container. So this container is a very masculine concept. It's a masculine concept, but it's in the expression that we begin to contain the energy, the information, and our confidence. Our confidence to hold this information and to not just to give it a home, but to trust it. To be able to collect it, you need to be able to trust it. Otherwise, what's happening, and I'm seeing this bowl, my hands are like in the shape of a bowl right now. I'm seeing all of this information come in, but then you're discarding parts of it and putting it aside because you don't trust it. This is solar plexus, and this is throat chakra. This is going back to those points of healing. And so why we heal the heart and the wounds that the heart has suffered, once we start to engage in that healing more actively, this is accepting some of the things that have happened to us, our experiences, how we feel about them. This is clearing the energy in your heart so that you can start to trust your heart again, so that you can have your heart open and not afraid of being hurt and suffering more injuries, not feeling safe. This is one zone. And so the information that's flowing through is currently flowing through that filter that has unacknowledged wounds and lacks the confidence to support the information that's received by containing it. And developing a container, this is developed by you. And it's not a structure. It's not necessarily a structure. It can be, but it's more of space you're making, space you're able to hold, to create in and share wisdom from, whatever that water is. Again, sometimes it's beauty, sometimes it's It could be whatever your healing modality is. And sometimes it's education. For some people, it's what knowledge, and some it's art. But you're able to contain it in a way that it's gathered, and then you can also benefit from it for yourself, whether it's for a reminder or wisdom that you're learning from yourself through your own channel and your own container. But it also makes it possible to then transform it and ready your container to share with others. Something else that came up for me is no man is an island, and that we can feel detached, but that too is an illusion. And as I was picturing this, I saw a baby in the center, like a naked baby, sitting at the center with all of these beams or cords reaching out to a whole lot of other babies, also naked. Okay, so these naked babies feel to me like creations, fresh creations. And so still needing care, for example. And this visualization was sort of explaining connection, but this web that we all form a part of. And each cord was sort of coming online as the baby almost comes online and realizes that there is a cord. So now this is realized also through expression. Sometimes it's through hearing. So you could hear something I say and feel very connected to what I'm saying and how I'm expressing my experience. Okay? So that's you recognizing that there is a cord of sorts. Okay, a flow of information that resonates. But then once you start to share, it lights that cord up. It's like it starts to glow. It creates a glow up when we're both plugged in. And so it's almost like, it felt like an umbilical cord, but there were many. And it's like, it was a way of sort of expressing even this container that I've created today to share all of this with you and how it was created. It's like I had a yearning within me, and I didn't know that it was going to unfold this way. I had a yearning within me, a calling within me, calling me to a place where I can share something from my experience and share some wisdom, also not knowing how it's going to be placed or whatever. Meanwhile, there is a James on the other side somewhere, and I'm mentioning something that came up in September, way back in September. But his name kept coming up because I do believe that he was calling. And so in the process of him calling out for this information, perhaps because it's overdue or whether it's necessary now or he feels it's needed. So this part of the collective feels this information is needed. I then start hearing it and I trust it and I come online and I'm here and I'm able to confirm that this call was heard by me. And so now we are all online, helping each other. People that may have felt like we are detached can now see that there is a cord, not one that binds us, but that is there for us to, I don't like the term feed off, but there's this idea that the umbilical cord has very valuable nutrients, and so it's and these nutrients are then transferred by us all coming online. And I put here that this glowing cord between us, it's like an active wire, it's a live wire. And so then there's that electricity that's then able to communicate all of this between us. And the last thing I want to share here today is that you remind me so much of myself. I could feel it. And I do believe there are many ways of manifesting. But what I'm feeling from you is the type that I am personally familiar with, which is the wounded healer. And that is a powerful manifester. It's even in the term itself, wounded healer. So we look at this term in terms of the healer who heals others and shares their healing with others through wounds that they have healed themselves. And so I honor that. However, there's also this other sense that came through for me strongly, which is that the wounds create the healer and the healer creates the wounds. Because the type of healer is true. It is real. It is created through wounds, but we cannot just look at it in a one-sided way. This is going back to what I said about then your environment is created by you. And so these wounds were created by the healer in you, because if you didn't have them, how would you assume your role as a healer? The wounded healer needs the wounds, and the wounds need the healer. And so we can honor ourselves. We can honor the wounded healer within ourselves by honoring our wounds, rather than not accepting that we are their creator to serve our own purpose. This last part of my writing felt so isolated because it came up as I opened my laptop to do this recording. But I started in the comments section and I saw someone's comment from a video I posted a day ago. So it's the last one before this, and I will link it in at the end of this video if you want to listen to it if you haven't. But she was talking about beginning to really embrace this idea of coming out and expressing herself and showing her world this part of herself. But she was also considering the backlash from her religious community. And so this is another example of something that can hold us back and leave us feeling like we're hanging in the balance, whereas actually what it is an environment we created for ourselves to be able to overcome something and actually have something to then express, something of quality, something of value, something of healing value. So all of these misfortunes, all of these circumstances that we regard as unfortunate, these are all doorways, openings, portals. They're like major signposts saying, look here, please look here. Let's see what this is about. Those are your key. I'm going to close this off now because I'm not sure my laptop can process the size of this container if I go on any longer. But I'm going to, as promised, I will share the playlist with some brief descriptions on, some is in the titling, and obviously even on Patreon and on YouTube, all of the thumbnails have got a description of what comes up in each container. But this playlist will be mainly centered around solar plexus healing, heart healing, and throat chakra healing. I don't believe I actually addressed the throat chakra healing, the expressive part of things, very much. A lot of the healing, most of it is embedded in the wounds that sit in the heart and the solar plexus, because like I said, once this is open, that is where the opening of the channel happens. And once that starts to happen, it naturally starts to create a balance of the safety that you need, because you also start to recognize your depth as an individual and the importance and value that sits in the nuances of you as an individual, reinforcing that your message matters. And this is a message that no one else has. And I mean that in the sense of it's, your voice is unique. Your own voice is unique. Your message is unique. And so wisdom is wisdom. And so as I speak to you, I'm not coming up with new ideas. I mean, a lot of the truth that I share can be found elsewhere, but it will be found in a different voice, with a different nuance, with a different form of expression. I am able to recognize it as true because I've lived it. And so that will come through with your own expression too. I'm going to close off by repeating James's questions. And this is also just to emphasize this experience for me, how amazing it's been, because James's email is the last thing really that I read before realizing that these questions had been asked and that the James was the creation of this particular container. He asked, how did you know you were a healer? How did you know how to channel? How did you pick the way in which you channel? And if you were me, how would you expand this? I believe these questions have been answered. I'm amazed they can be answered before gaining an awareness that there are questions. I truly believe in the power of manifestation. I think that this is an amazing universe that we get the opportunity to exist in, embody, to create, to actually know what it's like to create. And under such difficult circumstances, such challenging circumstances, our world, the way it is, currently presents so many obstacles to our expansion. But it's amazing that within these obstacles sit so many opportunities to become who we want to be. And so while the current state of the world can be seen as a circumstance, it is an opportunity, because I, for one, have no idea what I'd be doing that I love so much if the world was not this way. And also, just another gentle reminder that the recipients of your healing art, your consumer, your audience, has already put through the order for what you have to offer. And so, fear not the work to be done to make way. It in itself is deeply healing. Sending you so much love.